Welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of our Packers News live chat. Alongside Ryan Wood, I am Olivia Reiner. Today was the second day of the Packers OTAs and 90% of their roster showed up. However, quarterback Aaron Rodgers was not there. We will discuss the latest in his rift with the front office in a moment. Plus, we'll also take a look at who was present at Packers OTAs today. Before we get into that, as always, you know the drill. You can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, leave us a comment down in the chat. Ryan and I always love to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. It has been a month since reports surfaced surrounding Aaron Rodgers' discontent with the Packers front office. Finally, for the first time within that month, we actually heard from Rodgers himself last night on SportsCenter. Rodgers didn't say explicitly what he wants from the team in order to return in 2021. However, he did say that his discontent stems from the fact that he has some issues with the organization's philosophy. What does that mean, Ryan?
Well, if you know anything about the way that Aaron Rodgers communicates, it's oftentimes very veiled. He doesn't just come out and say things. Look, I've been talking with him, listening to him for 7 years, and it's just the way that he communicates, and it's always very artful, right? It's very skilled. So he comes out and says, this has never been about the pick of Jordan Love. And that's the first thing he says when he's asked, are you demanding a trade? Well, that sounds pretty clear, right? It's never been about the picking of Jordan Love. You can't get more clear. It's the first thing you hear. You go on into the answer, though, and he talks about how a lot of this situation was set into motion last year. Well, what happened last year? Two things happened last year. They picked Jordan Love and he won MVP. The two things that happened last year. And he says that he threw a wrench into it by winning MVP, and that this is really a spill out of all that. Well, what is all that? There is no all that. There's nothing to throw a wrench into if they don't pick Jordan Love, first of all. And the wrench is that he then won MVP. Pretty hard to read the rest of that answer as anything other than, yeah, they picked Jordan Love, I won MVP, and now I'm upset and I want to stick it to him. And that's the way it comes across. If you really get past the beginning of that answer, that's what he's saying. So I don't know if there's any other rational explanation for that answer, but he kind of talked out both sides of his mouth. It's not about Jordan Love, but really it's about Jordan Love and the picking of Jordan Love. Not Jordan Love the person. He likes Jordan Love the person. But the picking of Jordan Love, yeah, that ticked him off and motivated him. He went on to win MVP, and now he threw a wrench into it. This is a spill out of all that. That's the crux of the issue here.
Earlier in the day, we heard from wide receiver Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons on Undisputed, and whether or not he knew he was live, not entirely sure he did know that. He was very explicit and candid in wanting out of Atlanta and wanting a trade. Why hasn't Aaron Rodgers shown that same level of candidness with this situation?
Well, again, it goes back to the way that Aaron Rodgers communicates. When has he ever, in your recollection, my recollection, anyone's recollection, just come out and said anything bluntly and directly? He's a very careful and very articulate human being, very articulate, very skilled in kind of sending his message without saying his message. And I think that you heard a lot of that last night. Look, he said that he loved everyone in the organization, fans, Packers teammates, Packers coaching staff, everyone except for two people, Mark Murphy and Brian Gutekunst. Those are the two he left out. Everyone else he loves. He didn't even, I almost expect him to say he loved the media. I mean, he said everyone else except for those two people. That's a message that he doesn't love them, or he'd say that. He's very careful. Like, he doesn't misspeak. He's talked about in the past, everything he says has a purpose and a reason. He singles out guys from practice that he believes should be singled out. The guys that he doesn't single out, that's a message to them. Same thing here. So it's just the way that Aaron Rodgers communicates. And again, yeah, Julio Jones, I'm not sure he knew he was live. I guess that was good TV. You'd be the expert on that, Olivia, but that was some very interesting theater to me.
I'm sure we'll find out more in the coming days and the coming weeks whether or not Julio Jones knew he was live. That is neither here nor there. We'll continue along in our conversation. Aaron Rodgers obviously was not at OTAs today or yesterday. He's not in Green Bay. Not a surprise, however, it is noteworthy, seeing as he has been a regular participant in OTAs in the past in his career. Aaron Rodgers wasn't the only veteran that was not present at OTAs today. A huge chunk of the Packers wide receiving core was not present, including wide receiver Devontae Adams, Allen Lazard, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Devin Funchess, Equanimous St. Brown. The list goes on. How does that impact what the Packers are able to do on the field with the players that are there?
I asked Matt LaFleur this very question today because ideally you'd expedite Jordan Love's development this time of year. He's getting all the first-team reps. Blake Bortles did not practice today, so he's getting all the first-team reps as a backup plan, because the reality, the potential is there for Jordan Love to be your starting quarterback this fall. It's a very real possibility. So you'd expedite that development. Well, it's not ideal to have him not throw to the guys that theoretically he'd be throwing to this fall, and those guys you just mentioned are the guys he'd be throwing to this fall. And he said, Matt LaFleur said, it's less about having the right person in place the way that it would be in a practice in the regular season where you're game planning for a specific opponent. And it's more about just schematically learning the playbook, the X's and O's, not who, but what. That's what this time of year is. So they're working around that, he believes. And that's something that, again, it's not ideal, but he doesn't believe that that's really stunting Jordan Love's development. The reality is that those receivers are going to be here for mandatory minicamp, and they're going to be here in training camp, which is where it's much, much more important. So big term, it's not something that's going to stunt his growth necessarily, but it's also not ideal. You'd want him throwing to Devontae Adams in May if he's going to throw to Devontae Adams in October.
Mandatory minicamp begins on June 8th and runs through June 10th, so we'll see which veterans do show up for that mandatory minicamp. Some of the veterans have shown up for typical OTAs that are not mandatory, including defensive lineman Kenny Clark and safety Adrian Amos. Both of them have money tied to their contracts in order that they have to show up to offseason workouts in order to receive that money. Both of them were asked today about the Aaron Rodgers situation and how it's going to impact this team. And the overwhelming consensus is that the players are just focused on what they can control. They're focused on showing up at practice. They're focused on giving effort at practice. They're not focused on whether or not Aaron Rodgers is doing either of those things. How is this Rodgers situation going to impact the culture surrounding this team this offseason?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, both of them were also asked, why did you show up when it's voluntary? And I thought their answers were hilarious because it was true. I mean, it was blunt and direct and honest. And I tweeted them both out. Go to my Twitter at @MyRyanWood if you want to see the answer. But it basically equated to, I'm getting paid, because they have workout bonuses. So they were making it's a brilliant contract structure the Packers have in place to get these players who don't want to be in Green Bay, if they can help it, to Green Bay in May and June. They're getting paid to, and without that, that's $600,000 in Kenny Clark's case that he's not getting if he's not here. So, he's getting paid to be here. As far as the distraction goes, Olivia, this is going to be the summer of Rodgers. This was just the start of it. This is going to sit here. It's going to be this way, assuming he doesn't show up to mandatory minicamp, which seems very unlikely right now. June 8th, it's the same questions are going to exist no matter who's on these Zooms. Just wait till he doesn't show up to training camp. It's going to hit a fever pitch then, and the longer it goes, the more intense it's going to be. It's going to be the crucible of distraction. So Matt LaFleur has his work cut out for him, and he said that he did address it with his team, this whole Rodgers situation, and basically the message was control what you can control, do your jobs. They got jobs to do too. It's a 53-man roster. The most important of that 53 is the quarterback by far. The other 52, you still got a job to do, and it all contributes to winning. So that those 52, do your job and show up to work and not worry about the other stuff. Ultimately, it's not so. Adrian Amos said today that he's followed it. I mean, he's followed the situation. It's not something that he's going to get sidetracked by, because he's got to show up and do his work. So these are professionals, and I think that at the end of the day, while they can't be completely tuned out to the reality that this is a different situation with the team if they don't have the quarterback that's the MVP last year, it doesn't change their reality, their situation so much, because they've still got to do their work.
When Amos and Clark discussed their workout bonuses tied to coming to OTAs, I was reminded of Marshawn Lynch's words, very different. I'm not here so I won't get fined. Clark and Amos were here so they would get their workout bonuses.
Yes.
More or less the same thing. All right, let's go.
We're getting paid. We're getting paid to be here. Everyone's got a job to do. You show up to your job because you get paid. That's why. It's all about money in this economy, right? So it's no different for NFL players. You get $600,000 to work for 2 months. You're going to do that.
Understood. Can't relate. Understood. Thank you.
Shoot, I would do that for $600,000. You kidding me? I would do that. I get creamed. I get decimated, and it wouldn't even matter. Give me $600,000. I'll take a hit from Kenny Clark. That's fine for $600,000.
No shot.
Maybe
no one.
Not too.
No one. No. No one wants to see that, Ryan.
Maybe they do. No.
Well, maybe you do out there in Packers fans. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, let us know. Do you want to see Ryan take a hit from Kenny Clark? Hopefully your answer is no.
Kenny Clark's not going to see this, right? Like, for $600,000, not a free, for $600,000. It's a lot I would do for $600,000. That's a whole nother show, but I could. Plus, I'd be padded. Pad up.
We'll save that conversation for another day. Let's take some of your questions now on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. We will start with Periscope right now. Cheesehead over on Periscope said that they heard on the LaFleur call that the wide receivers didn't show up. Do you know anything about why they didn't? So the NFLPA, the Players Union, has been pretty vocal in encouraging players to not participate in the voluntary portions of this offseason, which is most of it except for the mandatory minicamp. How likely is it that the players, the wide receivers in particular, were influenced by the NFLPA's demands of their players this offseason?
It's really interesting that of the 10 players that didn't show up, half of them were receivers, and then one of them was the quarterback. Matt LaFleur said that as far as his knowledge goes, this was not a coordinated collective effort by the receivers. Logically, it makes sense that if the quarterback's not going to be there, you might not be there too. He's the guy you want throwing passes to you, right? So, again, it's not ideal for Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur did say that he spoke to each individually. As far as his knowledge goes, it's not a coordinated effort. And it's important to also say that these are voluntary. They don't have to be here. They don't get the workout bonus to be here. So in Devontae Adams' case, I think he had a $500,000 workout bonus. Well, Devontae Adams is also in line for a mega contract extension. It's a little easier for him, perhaps, to say no to $500,000 when he's going to get paid very soon. But still, it is voluntary. They don't have to be here. So, yeah, Matt LaFleur said it wasn't coordinated, but it was interesting that half the players not here are receivers, and that's the top 5 veteran receivers you have.
We'll see if the receivers show for the mandatory minicamp, and if and when they do, hopefully we'll be able to talk to them about why they decided not to attend the voluntary portion of OTAs. Thank you, Cheesehead, for your question. Let's go over to Smumster on Periscope. They want to know if the front office wants to fix their situation with Aaron Rodgers, throw Rodgers a bone, and trade for Julio Jones. All teams have cap issues. How likely is it that Rodgers would be more inclined to return if the Packers traded for an elite receiver or another player that he might really want on the team?
This seems to go deeper than the roster, and I think Aaron Rodgers has indicated that. It's deeper than the personnel of who he's playing with. So the other part of that is if the Falcons apparently have been asking for a first-round pick for Julio Jones reportedly, that's a lot to ask for a guy that's had all the injuries he's had. And I mean, I get that he's a future Hall of Famer, but man, that first round pick at this point in his career is a hefty asking price that is going to be hard to see any team paying. So I don't see the Packers paying that. I don't think that's going to happen. The other point of this is they especially are not going to pay a first round pick for Julio Jones when they have the returning top scoring offense in the league. So would they be a better offense with Julio Jones? Of course. I mean, every team would be better. But at what price? When you're already the top scoring offense in the league, the cost value just doesn't add up there.
Thank you, Smumster, for your question. We appreciate you joining us. Let's go over to Randall on Facebook. Randall says either fire general manager Brian Gutekunst or trade Aaron Rodgers. His veiled messaging is worse than Favre's waffling, but Gutekunst is easier to replace. In what universe, Ryan, would the Packers ever consider going to their front office and making a change rather than making a change to their roster?
Yeah, Randall, two things are not happening. They're not trading Jordan Love. They're not firing Brian Gutekunst. Nor should they, by the way, because if you look at the moves, Brian Gutekunst has done an outstanding job as general manager. Packers fans that don't think he's done a good job, I don't think you're really looking at the big picture here in the roster moves that he has made. Look at the offensive line that Brian Gutekunst built. Look at the draft pick of Jair Alexander. His very first draft pick is an all-pro quarterback. Pretty good. His second round pick the next year, Elton Jenkins. Literally the most athletic. Elton Jenkins was taking left tackle reps all day today. He looks like your early front runner to fill in for David Bakhtiari. That's a left guard. He's a Pro Bowl left guard. It's tough to find those guys that can play all five positions. Elton Jenkins is one. You look at the other side. Look at what he did with the Smiths, bringing them in. I understand Preston Smith had some decline last year. He's still a solid player. Darius Smith, second-team All-Pro. That's the guy Brian Gutekunst signed. If you look at the roster moves, and look at the other way. He released Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson went on to play one more season. Then he retired. He did not sign back Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb has not been the same player since leaving Green Bay. So where has he gone wrong? We don't even know that he's gone wrong with Jordan Love yet. We really don't know. We'll know in 3 years, and maybe he did. And if he did, it'll cost him his job because you don't draft a first-round quarterback with Aaron Rodgers on the roster and have him bust. He cannot bust. It's a lot of pressure there. You're putting your whole career on the line with that decision. No different than any other GM drafting a first-round quarterback. It's difficult to recover from if it's a bust. We don't know if Jordan Love is a bust yet. We got to get that's the one decision that fans like to pile on and question. We don't know the answer to that. If you look at everything else, he's done a bang-up job. And so he's not getting fired, nor should he, because he's been a tremendous decision maker when it comes to personnel moves for the Packers roster.
Thank you, though, Randall, for your question. We appreciate it. Let's go over to Glenn on Facebook. Glenn says, what's the biggest win you'd expect from OTAs? Like, what is the main point of them? OTAs, for the most part, are voluntary. There's no contact. So what is Matt LaFleur looking to get out of these next several weeks, the third phase of the off-season program?
As much as Jordan Love development as you possibly can, right? Like, that's got to be front and central in this whole thing. Again, no receivers. It's tough to do, but he talked about getting command of the offense, command of the huddle, the intangibles. When you're taking first-team reps exclusively, it's a different deal, especially at that position. I mean, you're the guy who is in the spotlight, and you're working with Aaron Jones now. You're working behind the first-team offensive line. You're working against the first-team defense. Everything is different. And even though he's wearing the red jersey, he's not wearing pads, and it's no live rush, it's still he's in that role and he's in that spotlight. It's different for a young guy. So that it starts there. Everything else, I mean, it's no different than any other OTAs. You can look at the other 52 positions. It's just getting on the same page, working on communication, getting used to the guys playing around you, and getting comfortable with the playbook, getting ready for what's to come. Not in mini camp so much as training camp. When training camp opens, making sure that you're on the ground ready to run them.
Jordan Love took all of the reps with the ones. There was only 2 quarterbacks active and participating in OTAs today in Love and Benkert. Benkert worked almost exclusively with the 2s, running 11-on-11 drills, 7-on-7. So Love got a ton of reps. He didn't have to split them with anyone. Undoubtedly, that's some invaluable experience for the young quarterback. Thank you so much, Glenn, for your question. Let's go to Mike on Facebook. Mike says, if Rodgers refuses to play for the Packers, do you trade him or do you force him into retirement? What is the best move for the Packers in a situation where Rodgers doesn't want to play?
Well, right now, Mike, they made it clear they're nowhere near ready to trade him. This thing is not going to be over come June 1st. It's going to drag out. With that said, at the end of the day, they're not firing Brian Gutekunst. They're not trading Jordan Love. And so if those are the two conditions for Aaron Rodgers to return, that's not going to happen. And if there's no other willingness, if the quarterback doesn't bend and the chances of him playing ever again for the Packers goes down to zero, then you're looking at an MVP with 3 years left on his contract, and you can't lose that guy for nothing. You got to get something for that guy if the chances of him ever playing for you again really are in fact zero. So they could draw this out a very, very long time. But again, this is buckle up and settle in. This is not going anywhere for a while. But if you want to get your max return for a guy that's never going to play for you again, you don't want a Barry Sanders situation where he just goes off and retires and you don't get anything. I think sometime by the October trade deadline in the regular season, if these sides can't come together, you're probably going to see a resolution by then. I do think that eventually you could see the team, if the chances are zero, you can see the team yield, but they're nowhere near close to that. They made it very clear they want Aaron Rodgers to be their quarterback in 2021.
I've got my imaginary buckle secured, ready to report and discuss all of the Aaron Rodgers related news as it continues to come. We will be back to continue to have these conversations with all of you as OTAs continue and as we get closer and closer to the mandatory minicamp. June 8th is that magic first date of the mandatory minicamp. Thank you all so much for your thoughtful questions and for joining us. For Ryan Wood, I am Olivia Reiner. We will see you next time.